Hey there folks, Scottsdale Travel Chick Sidekick here to present our ultimate visitor guide to Lisbon, Portugal. In this video, we'll cover all the cool things you'll want to see and do on a visit to Lisbon, along with how to get there, how to get around, the best times to visit, the best places to stay, the top nightlife areas, and more. And we'll show you everything on maps, so you'll know exactly where everything's at once you get there. Okay, let's go. First up, just a bit of background on Lisbon. Lisbon is the capital city of Portugal and sits on the Tagus River. Lisbon's overall size is quite large, but the touristic portion has a wonderful amount of sights to see in a small area. But just be warned, you will have to deal with a few hills. Fun fact, Lisbon, or Lisboa in Portuguese, actually predates historic capitals such as Paris and Rome, and it's the oldest city in Western Europe. Remnants of this long history remain today among Lisbon's sights, intermixed with great viewpoints, a plethora of street-side dining, unique Portuguese nightlife and music, and a historic network of trams and lifts to get you around. Today, Lisbon is regarded as one of the most vibrant and charismatic cities in Europe, and it's become a very popular tourist destination in its own right. You certainly will not be at a loss for things to see and do when visiting Lisbon. Similar to most European destinations, Lisbon's summer months are considered the peak season and therefore will be the most expensive and most crowded with tourists. And it's actually quite hot during the summer months here as well. So, those looking for a more inexpensive and enjoyable experience should do their best to visit Lisbon in either the spring or early fall, when the weather is the best and the crowds are less. Even in the winter months though, Lisbon remains a pleasant experience with average highs in the 60s. And here's another fun fact. Among all of Europe's capital cities, Lisbon has the warmest winters on the continent. Assuming you are not on a cruise ship, you'll arrive Lisbon by one of two options, through Lisbon's airport or by train from another part of Europe. People arriving by plane will land at the Humberto Delgado Airport, which is a very short 8 kilometers or about 5 miles northeast of the city center. So it's an easy trip to your hotel in 15 to 25 minutes by either the red to blue metro lines or an Uber or taxi. Taking the train will cost you less than €2 per person, and an Uber is typically 15 to 20 euros to the city center. There is an airport bus as well, but it's not very convenient and no cheaper than taking the train or Uber, so our recommendation is to skip this. If you're already in Europe and arriving by train, then the two main rail stations to be aware of are Orient Station, northeast of downtown with direct links to the airport as well as Portugal's other cities, and Rossio Station, which is in the heart of historic downtown on one of the main squares. Rossio is also a main hub for various city metro lines, as well as trams, buses, and taxis. Now, let's talk about getting around Lisbon in general. I'll cut right to the chase and say there are a multitude of metro lines, trams, elevators, and ferries which can easily get you to anywhere you want to go cheaply and easily. And all these options can be paid for by one easy metro card called Viva Viagem. It's really a must unless you prefer to take taxis or Uber everywhere. You can buy the card at any metro station and then either buy an all-you-can-use day pass or simply load the card with a lump of money and don't worry about things. We recommend buying a card at the airport, preloading it with 10 to 20 euros to start, and then you're off on your own without having to worry about transportation for most of your trip. And each ride costs less than €1.50 to anywhere in the city. If you have a lot of luggage or you don't mind paying a bit more, then Uber is everywhere as well, and most trips around the Old Town will cost you less than €6. Taxis should be about the same price, but we'd recommend skipping them as there's a real risk of being overcharged if you're not paying attention. Finally, if you don't mind walking a bit while encountering some small hills, then we most recommend walking everywhere you can. There are not many big streets in the Old Town area, and it's safe to walk most anywhere, so get out and explore. And I promise you'll find something interesting on almost any street you walk down. Of course, there are simply too many lodging options to give you specific recommendations here, but let me just say that there are two zones for tourists to consider: Old Town and outside of Old Town. Almost all lodging options in the Old Town areas are local small hotels or VRBO options. If you want to be in walking distance of most sites, then these are your only options. Most major hotel chains, however, such as Marriott, Hyatt, and Hilton properties, are all located outside of the Old Town area, mostly to the north. These areas are nice in themselves and great places to explore, but you will need to take some type of transit or at least a 20-minute walk to get yourself into the most popular Old Town areas. Now, with all that out of the way, let's dig into the top things to see and do in Lisbon. Lisbon has a ton of beautiful and memorable sites to consider, but before I dive into specifics of all of them, let me first give you a feel for the various areas of Lisbon, which are the tops on everyone's lists. Three areas constitute what is known as Lisbon's Old Town. The first is Baxia, or the Lower Town, which is the primary downtown area that begins at the riverfront and moves north. This area is somewhat more modern than the other parts of Old Town Lisbon, as it was completely destroyed during the major earthquake in 1755. I won't talk about it here, but you will undoubtedly hear more about this earthquake during your visit to Lisbon. Just to the east of Baxia is the famous Alfama, the oldest part of Lisbon. I'll talk more about it later in the video. After these two areas, you have two more integrated areas just to the west: Chiado and Barrio Alto, or the Upper Town. This area is somewhat quiet in the daytime, but becomes alive with some of the best dining and nightlife. Two other areas outside of Lisbon's Old Town, but common tourist destinations, are Liberdade and Bellum. The Liberdade area is where many of the bigger hotel chains are located, along with Lisbon's most famous high-end shopping street. Then there's Bellum. Bellum is the second most popular area after the Old Town, and is technically part of Lisbon, but in reality, it's a separate historical area along the riverfront about 30 minutes west of Old Town. Finally, one other area a bit off the radar screen, but one you should consider if you have some extra time, is the Almada area just across the river from Old Town. Here you'll find some great beaches, a cool little fishing village, the impressive Christ the Redeemer statue, and a unique uncrowded river walk with a free scenic elevator. This Almada area is an easy 20-minute ferry ride from downtown, and we have a separate video on it, so check it out if you want to learn more. Just search Almada Day Trip Scottsdale Chick. Okay, with Lisbon's general tourist areas out of the way, let's get right into all of Lisbon's top sites. I'll group them by the areas I just mentioned, and in chunks you may consider as a day-by-day itinerary. Okay, let's go. First up are the Baxia and Alfama areas. They are right next to each other, and both can be combined in one day. As I mentioned, the Baixa or Lower Town area was completely rebuilt after the 1755 earthquake. For this area, we'll start at Rosio Square, which is Lisbon's main pedestrian and shopping square. It's also a transit hub and has many interesting streets surrounding it. Just to the north of this square, you have Liberdade Avenue. Liberdade is Lisbon's most famous high-end shopping street, modeled after Paris's famous street with a wide boulevard and a park-like setting running down the middle. Also, just off this square, you have other sites to explore. The Church of St. Dominic was dedicated way back in 1241 and was at the time the largest church in Lisbon. But much of its original beauty is now gone thanks to 2 earthquakes and a massive fire in 1959. The scars from those events can still be seen in the partially restored building you see here today. Portas de Santos Street runs north from this church and is a touristy pedestrian street with lots of outdoor dining options. The Santa Justa Lift and Gloria Funicular are also 2 fun and unique transit options nearby, which can take you up the hill to the Barrio Alto district. Pro tip, take the Gloria Funicular up and the Santa Justa lift down, and the lift will be free. Once you've finished with the sights around Rosio Square, begin your stroll down Augusta Street and explore the many shops and dining establishments along the way and to either side. In particular, be sure to check out the Ginjaha shops. These shops sell Lisbon's local specialty of cherry wine. As you finish off Augusta Street to the south, you'll come to the Augusta Arch in the Commerce Square. Augusta Arch was completed in 1873 to celebrate the reconstruction of this area after the 1755 earthquake. It's beautiful from the outside, but you can also climb inside to the very top for elevated views out over the area. Entrance fee is €250. The Commerce Square itself faces the Tagus River and sits on the site of the original royal palace, which was destroyed during that earthquake. Here today are many interesting sites surrounding the square, so check them out, and once you're done, head east along the riverfront and then work your way into the maze of old streets called Alfama. Alfama is Lisbon's oldest neighborhood, with charming streets, a historical castle, and many scenic city overlooks. The Romans and Visigoths occupied this area as early as the 4th century AD, and this area was on more solid and higher ground, so it largely survived the massive earthquake and subsequent tsunami of 1755. Therefore, you can get a real feel for what Lisbon was like hundreds of years ago in this area, with its irregular streets, whitewashed terraces, orange-tiled roofs, and wrought iron balconies. It's a great area to just wander around. One word of caution though, the area is hilly, but the bonus to that is that this leads to some spectacular viewpoints. Near the bottom of Alfama is Fountain del Rei, the oldest fountain in Lisbon. It's no longer in use, but its history is still there. It used to be the main fountain for the city for household water and was segregated by class back in the day. The Fado Museum is nearby and one of Lisbon's best hidden gems. It's an interactive museum boasting an array of instruments and exhibits on the history of Lisbon's famous folk music. Fun fact, Fado music was invented in this Alfama area by the wives of sailors who used to sing such music for the safe return of their husbands. A bit further to the east are 2 more sites perhaps worth a detour. Stop by Lisbon's Military Museum near the waterfront to see some historical arms history of Portuguese power, but the building is the real star here. It's beautiful. Entry is only €3. Lisbon's Pantheon is another beautiful building nearby with a great viewing deck at the dome if you climb to the top. This building actually houses many tombs of famous Portuguese people across the centuries. €4 entry. Coming back to the heart of Alfama and moving further uphill, you'll come to the Lisbon Cathedral. Various earthquakes have led to it being rebuilt many times in different styles, yet it remains the oldest operational religious church in the city, founded back in 1150. Continue walking uphill or take one of the many tuk-tuks waiting nearby to see even more of Alfama's famous sights. Next up are two scenic viewpoints next to each other, Santa Luisa and Porto do Sol viewpoints. You are sure to be impressed, but pro tip here, these are not the best viewpoints in Alfama, and I'll give you our top choice in just a bit. But from this viewpoint area, wind your way 10 minutes further and check out the massive St. George's Castle. You buy your €10 ticket just below and enter the walled complex. The castle features 11 towers, a restaurant and bar, centuries of history on the site, and stunning views of the Old Town and Tagus River below. Moving even further uphill, there are two more viewpoints here. The Gracca viewpoint is first and is behind a church with a small outdoor cafe nearby. Check it out, but it's not the most impressive. Senhora do Monte viewpoint is 8 minutes further uphill and is, in our opinion, perhaps the best viewpoint of Lisbon looking to the west. It's worth it to check out, even if you have to take a short Uber or tuk-tuk ride to get there. Pro tip on the Alfama area, if you don't want to walk all the way up through these sites, Tram 28 is a scenic and unique option to ride all the way to the top and then walk in reverse everything I mentioned. However, this Tram 28 is super popular, and this means also super crowded. So our pro tip is to also consider Tram 12, which covers almost the same route and has a lot less people on it. The final area of Old Town is known as Chiado and Barrio Alto, or the Upper Town District. It's mostly a quiet neighborhood during the day with a few nice historical sights to see, but in the evening it comes alive with many trendy restaurants, bars, cafes, and rooftop terraces. Even if you're not a nightlife person, it's a fun area to explore in the evening just to see the streets buzzing with energy. There are said to be more than 200 family-run restaurants and bars in this area. As with Alfama, walking from Baixia to Barrio Alto will be uphill, so be prepared to trek up or simply take one of the elevators or funiculars. There are 3 to choose from, 2 of which I've already mentioned, Santa Justa Elevator and Gloria Funicular near the Rosio Square area of Baixia. One other option is the cable car called Bica Funicular closer to the waterfront. It's much less crowded than Gloria, so consider this as an alternative if you're near the riverfront. Anyway, once you make it to the Barrio Alto Upper Town, these are the top sights to see. First up is the San Pedro viewpoint or Miradora. This happens to be our second recommendation for the best viewpoint in all of Lisbon. It's at the top of the Gloria cable car, and it's a big, tiered garden area with tremendous views eastward out over the Old Town and toward the St. George Castle. And as an added bonus, there are a couple of nice outdoor cafes here to just sit and relax while you enjoy some of the street performers who often do their thing in this park. Nearby this overlook is the San Roque Church, which is one church that did make it through that earthquake. It's not much from the outside, but incredibly beautiful from the inside. And here you can find one of the most expensive chapels in the world. It was constructed in Rome, blessed by the Pope, dismantled and reconstructed in Lisbon. The place is free to enter. Carmo Church and Convent are next, and this church remains largely in ruins from that 1755 earthquake. You can visit the inside as a museum, and just outside is a square where they have summer concerts. Next door is the National Guard for Portugal, and just behind are a couple cool cafes and access to the top of that Santa Justa lift. One fun fact about the Carmo Church and Convent is Christopher Columbus's wife is buried here. From here, move to the Luis Carmo Square. This is where many free Old Town tours originate, and you can simply stop by any day between 9 and 11 a.m. and catch one. Around this square is also a cafe frequented by a famous Portuguese poet. You'll get the story if you do any tour. And the world's oldest bookstore, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, although you'd never sense it from the look of it. There are a multitude of other interesting streets, shops, and buildings to explore in this Barrio Alto area, but I can't possibly cover everything here, so just explore. But be sure to end your day moving down the Barrio Alto area towards the waterfront, where you'll come to Lisbon's most lively nightlife area. Pink Street and the surrounding streets between there and the Time Out Market are loaded with nightlife. Pink Street itself is a former red light district that's been transformed into one of Lisbon's trendiest areas. Nearby is a large converted warehouse now known as the Time Out Market. It's very touristy, but check it out anyways, as it's loaded with almost 50 drinking, dining, and dessert establishments. I'd liken it to a big German beer hall, but it's much more than that. The wonderful and historic Bellum area is next, but just a quick break here to say if you're enjoying this video, please give us a thumbs up, an encouraging comment, and maybe even forward it to a few of your friends. And please consider subscribing to our channel for more fun, informative videos just like this one. Okay, back to Bellum and the waterfront area. Bellum and the western waterfront area are technically part of Lisbon proper, but most tourists consider this area a separate day trip and organize a guided tour. Bellum is quite significant, as it was the location back in the 1500s where many great explorers left to discover the New World. Most sites around Bellum give a nod to this time. One is the Tower of Bellum, which was originally a fortress built in 1515 to protect the entrance to Lisbon Harbor. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and symbolizes Europe's age of discoveries. Entrance is €9, but honestly, skip it, as the inside is pretty boring and not worth the queue. But speaking of Europe's age of discoveries, there is actually a monument here specifically dedicated to that. And, you guessed it, it's called the Monument to the Discoveries. It features Prince Henry the Navigator and many other famed Portuguese explorers, and you can actually climb inside of it for a view. Not to be outdone by these riverfront attractions, Jeronimos Monastery is a huge site nearby and one of the most visited landmarks in all of Lisbon. This site is loaded with beautiful details and features the tomb of Vasco da Gama, the Church of Santa Maria de Bellum, and an Instagrammable 2-story cloister, not to mention a pretty cool archaeological museum as well. The original construction began in 1501 and was paid for with the profits from the spice trade. However, it took over 200 years to complete. Pro tip, entrance to the church is free, but the rest will cost you $10, closed on Mondays. Nearby is also the National Palace of Bellum. It's a large pink building that's currently used as a residence for the President of Portugal. Next to that is the National Coach Museum, which is housed in a former riding school of the palace and contains the world's largest collection of royal coaches and vehicles. One more place nearby, which requires a detour but probably worth the trip, is the Ajuda National Palace. This was the last royal palace of a Portuguese king, and it was meant to be one of the largest palaces in all of Europe, with gardens cascading down to the riverfront. But only about 1/5 of the original project was completed before Napoleon conquered the area. Finally, I'll mention one more area which I'll call Liberdade, which is the northern area surrounding Old Town. It's not that touristy, but it's an area you'll likely visit, as most of the international hotel brands are here. This area is more modern and upscale and also has many small galleries, shops, and dining options that real locals frequent. Overall, there are not many touristy sites here though, but there are a few. One is that Liberdade Avenue, which starts here and runs down to the Baixa area. This boulevard is the nicest in Lisbon, with small cafes among the mature leafy trees, chic hotels, and upmarket shops. Lisbon's Botanical Garden is here, along with Lisbon's Natural History Museum right next door. And then there are two more options which might be worth a look. One is the Water Museum and Aqueduct, which is actually housed at a couple of locations. One has a huge underground cistern with a light show, and another has a large aqueduct which incorporates the largest stone arch in the world. Finally, there's the sizable Fonte Luminoso, or the Fountain of Light, along with a huge linear park that goes with it. Many locals come here to hang out, and it's a great place to visit if you want to get a feel for how locals really live and see the fountain at night. With that, I've covered the top tourist sites around Lisbon, but I'm not done yet. Let me just quickly touch on two of the most popular day trips from Lisbon. These two are consistently rated the best for first-time visitors. One is a trip to the mountainous town of Sintra. It is far and away the most popular day trip from Lisbon. Located less than an hour by train, it's famous for its 19th century Romantic architecture, royal palaces, gardens, and historic villas. The entire town is classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The second most popular day trip is a visit to the Cascais and Western Coast region, also about 1 hour from Lisbon. It's sometimes referred to as the Portuguese Riviera. Historically, this area served as a summer retreat for members of the Portuguese royal family and nobility. Today, it's a lovely seaside town with lavish villas, cobblestone streets, casinos, interesting museums, and many restaurants and bars. Our last section here is just a bit on Lisbon's dining and nightlife scene. It won't take you long exploring before you find dozens of places you'd like to try out, so let me just suggest a couple of buckets to consider. One is a fado restaurant. These are where they perform the traditional Portuguese fado music while you have dinner or a bite to eat. As this is pure Portugal, you really should try this at least one night. Another is dining at some place with a view. There are many rooftop restaurants and bars and elevated view choices around the city, so maybe just ask your hotel for one they might recommend. Lastly, if you want to try some more lively nightlife, then head to that Pink Street and Time Out Market area I mentioned earlier. There's a lot going on there every night of the week into the wee hours. Well, there you have it, folks, our ultimate visitor guide to Lisbon, Portugal. We hope you enjoyed. Did we miss any of your favorites, or do you have a secret tip you'd like to share? Then please let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more fun, informative travel videos just like this one.
Until next time, see you later.